this article was, just really thought provoking for me. And I mean, I've studied like the evolution of technology and the internet, and over the past few years. But this really blew my mind, and I think especially how you describe the evolution of innovation and the process, that's behind it in this article. And I think a lot of these thoughts come back in your book, The Price of Tomorrow, which of course we recommend everyone to read. But yeah, to start, I wanted to share a quote from Buckminster Fuller that you start the article with, and then ask you a question. So the quote goes, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." Can you share a bit on how Bitcoin represents such a new model in the financial world?
Yeah, and this is obviously it's really easy, but it's hard to understand because we drag our baggage, essentially all of our past experiences. We drag our baggage into our future view, and in other words, most people don't predict the future; they predict their present forward.
Yeah,
and so in predicting the future, you have to understand what has changed, and does that change impose new rules on everything else? Then you have to, instead of break your, and then what ends up happening, when the new rules that are imposed on all of your belief structures, most people, even once they understand it, want to drag their pre-existing belief structure into the new rule.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is the journey of the rabbit hole is what you just described in yourself, is you keep getting surprised and you realize it's deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's not anything that Bitcoin's doing. What it's doing is imposing a new structure on the world. And your beliefs are now starting to realize they're incompatible with your former beliefs. And for people that can do that, they go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and they understand what this means. And it's so profound. It's so profound a change in the world. It's just hard to even articulate what that means. And that's why you hear me say a couple of statements over and over and over again, trying to get people to realize kind of what's happening. So one of those statements is the natural state of a free market is deflation.
Yeah.
So now, unless you can prove that statement wrong, and you can't, because prices fall to the marginal cost of production, then anything that's ever come before it is any system, any political system, any economic system is essentially a control system disguised as a free market. Right? Because if the natural state of the free market is deflation, it means every year prices should fall for all of humanity.
Yeah.
And so you almost have to start there, and you have to say, is that true? And if it is true, then why isn't it true in the world we live in? So,
yeah.
Because that's why these are incompatible together. And what ends up happening throughout time is now going where it ties into Bitcoin. Also true is this: if we have an open, decentralized, and secure monetary network, or open, decentralized, secure protocol, bounded by energy, and creating energy abundance as it scales, then, and if that statement is true, you should do your work to see if it's true. If it is truly decentralized and secure, and it gets more decentralized and secure all the time, and it drives to lower cost energy and provides energy abundance, then it's also the first time in history we've ever had that.
Yeah, but so that, I think for people, it's like a double thing, right? Like the first,
yeah,
right? Like the first thing is as you mentioned, some people can actually, go down the rabbit hole, not only in the content of what they're learning, but also inside themselves, in a sense, right? Like every time that through just a rational approach, you discover new knowledge, which conflicts with what you've learned or how you think, something works. Well, then you can decide to adopt that new knowledge and change your beliefs, or you can fight it, right? I mean, we see that a lot, of course, in Bitcoin Twitter, and like how just recently, today, I saw a video of Natalie Brunell with like two apparently well-known people with a big following in like finance, and they get so emotional when they talk about their arguments against Bitcoin, right? So I think that's like one thing, right? Like the personal journey, in a sense, and that you can actually challenge your beliefs, and that it also kind of fulfills you, that it's fun for you, right? That curiosity and these new things. And then you have that second thing, as you mentioned, this is one of the things I try to, how I approach when I approach it when I talk with people about Bitcoin, is like, why do we joke about the bread being 30 cents 50 years ago, right? And it's now $4 or €4. Like, does that make sense to you? And then people say, of course not, and then I kind of go into that corner. But it's such a paradigm shift, right? So it's a double challenge.
It's a huge double challenge because we've never seen this before. It means what Bitcoin represents is something that no history book has ever seen before.
Yeah.
Right. And you can first go, is that true? Is it decentralized and secure? Can it be attacked? And you could believe that because everything else has always been centralized or gamed, gold has been centralized and gamed and repriced or manipulated, still is today. You could believe that Bitcoin is going to be, right? You could, but that's why a belief that it is going to be then requires you to say how. right?
Yeah.
And how is it going to be attacked? Because the evidence says it gets stronger and more decentralized and more secure every year. And that so the evidence gains and everything else on Bitcoin. And I tried to counter my own argument here and said, how would I attack it? All of the different things. And I'm not saying, and I don't take that lightly, because I realize the system we live in must steal money at an ever increasing rate. And it's all humans have ever known. And their political systems are tied to it. So all the political systems, whether you're libertarian, Marxist, totalitarian, capitalist, all of them are tied to a belief structure that steals money.
Yeah.
It's a control structure. And so if this was true, it would change the paradigm completely. And I wanted to go down to say, as hard as I could, to say, where would the attacks be? Where would the vectors of attacks be? Because you'd have to expect everything to come at it, because there was so much to lose from the existing system. And most people would be living in the existing system, making it stronger with their actions.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of making it stronger with their actions. So today, a lot of people store their wealth in, say, the Magnificent Seven. So do your pension funds, you do, so Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and NVIDIA. What do all those companies have in common?
They are led by someone. And
No, artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
So all of those companies, essentially, you use them every day because they're cheaper, because they give you more and more value. Right? And if they didn't run artificial intelligence and they had to increase their labor and they had to charge you more, you would use something else. Yeah, so every day you make them stronger with all of your actions. And then worse, you put your money into those companies because it's the only way to store your value. Because if you put them broadly in the S&P, you're losing money. Because those are the only companies that are gaining value. And then at the same time, you say to yourself, AI is accelerating and concentrating over me, right? And in this control structure, and everybody's doing it, the same exact reactions, because it's the only way to essentially protect their money from being debased, because you can't put it in the bank and let it be debased. So you're trying to get more. So our actions, all of our actions combined, are making the system stronger against us. And here's what's happening in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is repricing all of those companies because it doesn't care, right? So Bitcoin, if you look at those companies measured in Bitcoin, all of them are falling. Yeah. So as people start to understand what's happening, they're going to move more of their money to Bitcoin because it can't be debased, and that system is going to get stronger. And it leaves you kind of a paradigm choice that the more effort that you spend energizing the existing system that is really a control structure, no matter who in that control structure or what you believe in that control structure is helping you, climate change, economic systems, Biden versus Trump, all of this complete nonsense. It's all designed to keep that control structure intact. By the way, you can create a huge following by attacking it. You can create huge Twitter profiles and content by yelling at people on both sides of this, and then people yell at you, and all you do is make that thing stronger. And you think you're winning, but you're just wasting your time. Whereas Bitcoin is repricing that whole thing, everything, and over time, because of what we just said before. If it is true, if it's decentralized, secure, open protocol, bounded by energy and creating more energy abundance, then nothing is going to stop it from repricing the world. Now, the only thing you'd have to say is where is the risk of it getting centralized? You would have to determine that. You'd have to go in and say, okay, I believe that this is what's going to happen, and then you'd have your argument on how that's going to happen would have to be strong enough to say, because I can't see anything that I've looked at that doesn't keep this true. So now go to the first thing I said. If technology brings prices down, the marginal cost of production, and globally, we should have always lived in a deflationary world. And the only thing that could measure that is this new system. Then for all the participants of the new system, they're pricing the real market over forever. Prices will fall forever. And anybody, and now let's say you're a government and say even let's reset the debt. One day all the debt's gone and we're going to reset the debt. But the natural rate of deflation in the market should be 5% per year and accelerating and getting more as all the productivity flows. That means a 0% inflation rate, 2% inflation rate steals 5 to 7%, and it has to steal more and more. So now if you're measuring from that currency that has to steal from you, and you believe it's a really valuable currency, and Bitcoin doesn't care, then relative to that currency, Bitcoin's just going to go up. But relative to all prices will keep falling a bit against Bitcoin. So from those very simple kind of, what I try to do is what is true, and then if a new rule has been imposed upon us, what does that change? And instead of looking from the system we live in today forward, I look at what the new rules impose to all of our belief structures from the new rules.
Like, where do we place Bitcoin? Because in the article, you have an example of the BlackBerry and iPhone, right? Where also the iPhone didn't use the keyboard of the BlackBerry, right? Which was like the innovative thing before the iPhone, right? So they made a new thing, right? So I see that as a certain level. But when we talk about Galileo, for example, that was a real 180, right? A real 180 in how you view the position of the Earth, like in the universe. Like that's another level. And then Bitcoin.
So by the way, so is this. So
exactly. Yeah. There I'm coming. I think Bitcoin is at that level, right? Because we talk about money, we talk about the technology we use to exchange information with each other, right? I think that's also why, in general, it's hard for people. But I agree with you. Like, as long as that is true, like what Bitcoin entails, right, and how it's constructed, as you said, like, is it really decentralized? It's like you can check all these things. It's super transparent, perhaps even more accessible to check than Galileo's statement, right, for anyone, basically. But if Bitcoin is also that big as the Galileo example, when you just mentioned like entrepreneurs, right, they can help show more people this new truth or this new system, and then also help them adopt it, right? So how do you see that role of entrepreneurs, pushing Bitcoin?
This is a little complex, and again, it's not complex at all. It's actually rather simple, but our beliefs are complex on the other things that are getting changed slowly. So here's an example of what people confuse Bitcoin, and even the example I used, BlackBerry and Apple in that. We see more. So BlackBerry thought it was competing against a phone without a keyboard.
Yeah,
it was competing against a totally different communication device, and all of these apps that provided like 100x value over a phone. It was something totally different, and nobody would have seen it before. So it's totally understandable why BlackBerry thought they were competing against a phone, because that's what they had. That was the monopoly. And so, but this is an example of what we see, what you see more often, what everybody sees more often, is companies, because there's more companies competing in the free market, right, to give you more value. And then the next level under companies, we see broad-based technologies that change the underlying structure of everything in companies. The internet the AI is an example today of a broad-based technology that a whole bunch of other companies are using. And we see the companies more often. These broad-based technologies, or electricity was another, that sweep around and change all of the companies on top, kind of reset the game in new companies. But remember, we don't see those broad-based technologies as often as we see companies. So we're used to thinking in companies. Then the next level is we see broad-based technologies. We see them less frequently. And then very infrequently, we see protocols.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is in the protocol space. So it would make sense that if everybody was thinking it was a technology or a company, that they would be really confused. The internet was in the protocol space. So the internet, TCP/IP, is the base level of the internet that's used for this riverside communication right now. And it was 1989, 4 layers after that HTTP was formed, when all entrepreneurs created companies and value on top of the internet. And remember what the internet looked like in 1989. I do, right? It was it was this mail, and it was really hard, but you could see a glimpse of the future, and a whole bunch of entrepreneurs started building onto that future. And then in 2007, the iPhone came up using the exact same protocol stack.
Yeah.
This riverside does this.
Yeah, but would you say then, if people compare Bitcoin to like the horses and the train, and like these examples, that's then not really correct.
It's not a good.
Right?
It's not. You could, but it's a weak example because.
But then, like, the gunpowder example is better. I'd say like that's a new protocol for war or battle in a sense, right? Like,
but I would say even those are more broad-based technologies rather than protocols. And so protocols come around.
Where do we go then? Like,
as an example, the US dollar right now around the world is a protocol.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, but like fire and stuff like that. Like, is that still?
I would still say that that's probably a technology, and that's why these are so. And people could argue about the semantics of what I'm saying, but just if you just kind of simplify what I'm saying, is we very rarely see protocols.
Yeah,
and there's something
that's what I try more like to illustrate. Why it's so hard to understand is that because you have to get to that level, and there's not a lot of reference as to like how big can this be, right? So even aside from just the personal challenge of changing your mind like this. Just like how do I compare this to what? Because whatever you compare it to is probably outside of your lifetime also, right?
That's right. That's right. And so it's so easy to go back into the trap and carry your baggage of all your beliefs into the future. If you just said the base layer of the new internet is, because think about what protocols do. They do one thing really well, right? And they sacrifice other things to do that one thing really well. Yeah. So Bitcoin did decentralization and security really well. And to do that, they created a game incentive around securing abundant energy, kind of providing a market incentive. And they have nodes that are keeping that decentralized all over the world, kind of enforcing the rules.
Yeah.
So the design space to be able to do that decentralized insecurity really well creates a base layer that can't do anything else. It can't scale.
Yeah.
And people thought because they thought it was a technology, they thought, oh, we're going to create another technology like Ethereum
Faster one.
to scale,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When they're missing the whole thing that it's a protocol, and and if you lose decentralized insecurity, then it looks exactly like the same as the U.S. system, and the entire system would fail. So the decentralization security and the ability that it wouldn't scale on the base layer to billions of transactions per second on base layer is not a bug; it's a feature. But people thinking through the lens that it was a bug could easily convince and most people believing in technologies and seeing a whole bunch of people getting rich on Bitcoin for doing nothing, right? Just holding it, would say, oh, I'm going to build the next cool technology. Right? And they would get rich by essentially confusing those two things. And so now Lightning comes in, and you have the second layer that every 10 minutes comes down to the first level layer, and it makes trade-offs. And those trade-offs mean Lightning, if you just played forward Lightning, even right now, what people think versus what it'll look like. You see a whole bunch of nonsense about Lightning can't scale to billions of people. And it's because a lot of the developers in the space tried to build Lightning with the same rules as Bitcoin base layer. In other words, the scaling layer they built, I use an analogy as they used to be able to drive that liquidity. They built backlane one-way gravel roads, and people would get locked up in that backlane gravel road and then not have enough liquidity on the other lane to go back. And so people right now, even a lot of Twitter believes that Lightnings can't scale. When there's companies like Breeze building the super highways that connect cities, right? That you can scale on and off to other things like Fediment to be able to connect and scale in layers. And so that's exactly what the internet did. It scaled in layers. And each layer provides a different functionality with different trade-offs. But what I just described doesn't need a token, doesn't need anything else, it will scale in layers like this. There will be a whole bunch of noise. You have to expect what the existing system is going to do. If you realize that you can't attack layer one, right? If you're a government actor and you can't win on layer one, and now BlackRock's coming in and everything else, what would you do? You would try to attack layer two. And if you could attack layer two, what it would look like is you could hold it would eventually break. What I would describe would eventually the free market would win, and it doesn't matter. But you could suppress the price through layer two to keep your economic system in check instead of allowing it to be a peer-to-peer market. So in that context, I can actually see all of the things that are playing out here, and they make perfect sense to me because I've already done all of the game theory of what would happen.
Two things. So what you just said, like I went to, this is why Bitcoin cannot be discovered twice, basically.
Exactly.
Right? Because just this set of rules with this type of enforcement, with this type of incentives, like,
it's
you can literally copy it, but exactly, right? So that's why it's a discovery. So all the things built on top are technology. But what I see nowadays, and maybe that's also, in terms of what people say on Twitter, like, oh, lightning failed, etc. Do people expect stuff too fast, like to change too fast? Like we are in 2024. Like sometimes I have this idea that people expect lots of change in a very short amount of time. And one example is that people now say, well, Litecoin or like Lightning was like, 3 years old. Why doesn't it work? But is that too narrow of a view, you'd say?
Bram, I use Lightning every day. It always works. It's grown 1,200% over the last 2 years. It's exploding. We invested in a company that was doing 50 million in top line revenue or in trading volume in August. It did 470 million on Lightning transactions in January.
Wow.
The illusion that this doesn't scale. When I use it every day, it's so laughable. And here's the thing. It provides, anytime somebody says that, it provides opportunities for entrepreneurs to be able to solve different problems, which is happening. And so it is scaling. It's just going to scale in a different way because people are confused that it needs to scale in the same way Bitcoin layer one needs to scale. Like Bitcoin layer one needs to scale. That's a fair point. Yeah. So the confusion is, it will, over time, Lightning will not centralize. It will centralize a little bit. The liquidity on it will centralize. So there'll probably be 6 large liquidity providers, maybe 10, but it'll still, and because it'll be more efficient to use the superhighways. And those liquidity providers can provide you a higher, it's not a yield, fees on your Bitcoin in a non-custodial fashion because they'll be more efficient.
More transactions,
More transactions and more efficient, and they're building the superhighways. So that means there won't be thousands or hundreds of thousands of essentially nodes like we're talking in Bitcoin. There'll be the liquidity will gravitate.
Critical.
But what does that mean? And I think there's a lot of people that believe they live in a free market capitalism. So I'll say a couple of my really close friends going through this that are very, very wealthy in real estate. And they became really wealthy in real estate because of a manipulated system that pushes up real estate at the expense of productivity. And they're storing their value in real estate. And they're somewhat protected from money being destroyed. And they think that it's a free market. And they're so mad when the government comes in and says, we're going to regulation, rent controls, everything else. They're like crazy mad. And I said, okay, if it's a free market and we stop printing money, what happens to real estate? Like, just stop today. What happens to real estate? And let's keep stopping. And says, let's walk through that. And so they see real estate starts falling, then it falls more. Every bank fails. Real estate fails like almost to zero. All of their debts fail. All of their life, all of their wealth fails. And then they say, well, that will never happen. Then do we live in a free market? Right? And so it's like it's crazy to me that people can't put these together, because but what ends up happening is then they'll make a justification for it's almost free. Without seeing the negative externalities.
Because you profited from it, of course.
Exactly.
You say that.
Without
what else would you say?
Yeah, exactly. Without seeing the negative externalities of that almost free. And so now you have a control system that looks a lot like communism. Capitalism and communism are the same thing under printed money. Yeah.
Well, the government controls you, obviously. Well, it controls your thoughts or your wants and your needs, like you said.
And as artificial intelligence accelerates and should make productivity flow to everybody faster in the form of lower prices, the government has to consolidate more and more and take away more individual rights and freedoms to be able to control you. And it's crazy to me that people can't see this coming, because it's
because they cannot allow you to access this too
no,
much
because
or something?
if prices fall from a debt-based system. So when people say deflation is bad, they're saying deflation is, they're not finishing the sentence. They're saying deflation is bad from a debt-based system because the debt gets more expensive and it goes insolvent. Yeah. So they're not finishing the sentence, or they're not saying, and people aren't asking, well, if I vote every day through my time to get more value, and I choose things every day to get more value, how is deflation bad? It services me. So the free market in that case ensures that the entire world gains that productivity, not a couple people in the world that are extracting it from everybody else.
So how do your friends react when you talk through this? When you say, like, is there actually free market? They defend it a bit, and then
most of my friends are now Bitcoiners, but it takes and I'm some of my friends that had a hard time coming around to this because I would just keep on questioning from where they were, and then when they saw that they and I didn't do it in a mad way or anything else. I just asked them to solve the paradox themselves, and then eventually, as they couldn't solve the paradox, they started to realize, I need to put more of my time over here.
Yeah, makes sense. So when you talk about how advancing technology is inherently deflationary, in the article you show how it conflicts with an inflationary monetary policy, right? It's basically also what we just mentioned. They don't want to fail. So how does Bitcoin fit into an economy where technological process drives prices down? Like, is this finally the thing in which we should measure technological advancement? Does that make sense? Like because it makes it deflationary, and if we measure it in Bitcoin, then that is the match.
That's it. People talk about the AI singularity, where all AI is smarter than all of us, and robots are doing all of our work. Can you imagine that AI singularity in a world where prices are supposed to rise?
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Does it make any sense?
No.
Right? Why do we create technology? We create it to save our time. Yeah, and the productivity from it should flow to us. It's just it can't from the existing system. So these two systems
so it
are
sabotages technological advancement.
And then what happens with all of the people stuck in the wrong system? What they do is they get moved to fear, and it's easy to convince them that it's somebody else's fault. It's easy to convince them that it's the Democrats' fault, or it's the Republicans' fault, or it's Ukraine's fault, or it's Russia's fault, or it's Israel's fault. It's easy to convince, and they will grab, or it's the environment. They will grab on the thing they care about and yell at everybody on the other side of that and make the whole thing stronger.
Yeah.
It's really easy to divide people in this because we have our belief constructed by all of this, and it's easy to we don't want to see it in ourselves. We don't want to see that paradox. When I said it, some of my billionaire friends, you don't want to see it in yourself. You have to believe you protect that, right? You protect it because
it feels like some sort of failure, of course.
Exactly. No. I created all this wealth. I did it all. I did it all myself. I did it all. Yeah. So you can't, because deconstructing that means a whole bunch of the things you used to believe have to change. And so that's really hard for people to go through. And it's easier to say, no, your version of reality is true. It's those people.
Yeah. so because people find that difficult, that internal struggle, through fear, they can be corroborated to do or believe, a different thing. And you just mentioned like the 10x advantage. That concept also comes back in the article. I think that talks also more about how Bitcoin could be a solution to the problem these people have, but they are not aware of the fact that they have this problem, especially people who are wealthy through the fiat system. So, and you are an investor, right? Like I've also seen lots of startups. You have to understand the problem before you can adopt a solution, right? Yeah. So we have this internal struggle of, I didn't understand the system, but I still got rich. How did I do this? But so they don't see the problem. Like, how can we show people the problem, or how can Bitcoin be a 10x advantage in the solution if people don't know the problem, or that their current solution is very, very flawed?
So I think it is showing that, and it's showing it more and more. And your podcast shows more people. Like, think about what this podcast would have looked like, or you trying to do what you're doing right now. Try and do that 30 years ago. You couldn't have done that.
Yeah, it would be super crazy.
Yeah, you couldn't have done it. You would have to fly people into a studio. You would have to have enough money to put. And now,
like that, yeah.
Yeah. And now through technology, you can touch millions of people through a podcast that might touch. And then one of those people that changes their mind might touch billions of people. And you have no idea that it was you that touched this.
That's true.
And that's how the world changes. It changes through that belief system changing in people. And the belief system, if that belief system is anchored on a false reality, eventually people see it.
Yeah.
The truth, it's hard to put out the truth.